Where does our water come from? When we get a bunch of rain, that's what we need, but that water evaporates away so fast. The reality is, for all of us who live on the high plains, our water comes from underground. Every single one of our communities is sustained by groundwater. The problem is, it is not infinite. The water table has declined dramatically. We're taking a lot more out of the aquifer than is going back in. And so, what can we do? We're in the bottom of West Amarillo Creek at Wildcat Bluff. When it rains, that water comes down the creek and it flows downstream this direction. And it used to kind of flash over the ground, like it was here and then it's gone. In a matter of hours, it's like dry again. But we built a bunch of these leaky dams, these like natural infrastructure. And the whole point, we're trying to slow the water down and like spread it out. We wanted to take days or weeks or months for the water to leave the property. We want to like slow it down and get as much as we can. So it is just a pile of brush, and it's one way of recharging the aquifer. Come on, I'll show you.
The flyover zone that we live in serves a really important purpose, and that is providing people with their daily nutrition, their food that they live on. If we don't manage the rainfall in this area and catch the rainfall in this area, food supplies become an issue. In the past, when it hit the ground, the water automatically went in the ground, and only a piece of it ran off down the road. Today, between concrete and land use changes, that water doesn't have anywhere to go but downhill. So it's like a tin roof effect. It just hits the ground and it runs right off the roof and runs off to somewhere else. When that's gone, we never get that back again.
So how do you get more water in an aquifer? The answer is you work with the land, not against it.
That's what the landscape rehydration structures do. They help bring life back to the land.
Behind me is Wildcat Bluff, so whenever it rains, the rain that falls on the road puddles up further down and causes a bunch of problems. We recognize this, and we built some little diversions, like a speed bump, and so stormwater comes down, it's stopped, and then it's diverted to the side. And so we divert the runoff into the pit, and the water soaks in the ground. We added some compost and planted a bunch of seedlings. And thinking is, we can use this water from the road that was causing problems to sustain like a little forest. It's one of those, like, kind of just an experiment that we did, but it's working excellent this year. Simply put, it means more water for plants, animals, and us. Wildcat Bluff is so special because this is an example that's relevant to a whole lot of country. I can talk to somebody in western Kansas or even Wyoming, and we have this common interest in this aquifer system. We do a lot of guided hikes, a lot of field trips. It gives an opportunity for like engagement with the environment and also natural science education. We have these scientific papers from around the world of successful landscape rehydration, but like that's not going to change anything. People need to see it. The reason we do this work is because it empowers others to go out and do it themselves, and that's really what we hope for. My whole life, the landscape has gotten drier, and the message has been, it's inevitable. Our work exists to fight that narrative. It's small scale, it's inexpensive, and it's just it's a highly effective way of recovering ecosystem function.
Anything you can do to slow that water down at a higher level improves water capture in the region. Just a shovel and some rocks and a little bit of time. People can do a lot of good with it.
Our goal is to slow, spread, and soak stormwater. Our message is a hopeful one. This is Texas, and we need to step up. This is something that we're sharing in hopes that other people do it too. We're going to show you that, like, you can do something about it because we're doing it.
Well, welcome back, everyone. At the risk of losing the entire room to shuffling through your things, if you've lost a phone, it will be at the registration table. No need to dig through things now, we got it. But if there's anything you've set down and forgotten, please just look at the registration table as you leave, because it will be there. All right, so final discussion of the day. Very excited to really dive into reporting and educating stakeholders. We've talked through setting goals, evaluating opportunities, implementing programs, monitoring progress, setting up partnerships. And now it's time to tie all of this together. So once you've gotten all of that set up right, how do you report the results of what you've done and then put that back into a feedback loop so that you can make it part of your decision structure moving forward and so that you can continue to build on that success? So as always, we started with questions when we were planning for this discussion. And some of the top ones were, what will it take to consider conservation as operations critical versus a feel-good story? I'm excited to touch on that very specifically with the next presentations. How do we align conservation projects to rapidly growing sustainability efforts in supply chain, community engagement, workforce engagement, and workforce health? I know I heard from some of the business members at lunch today, that's really top of mind and something they were excited to dive into, is they have these things that feel disconnected, but how do we come together with a strategy that integrates all of this that we're looking at? How do we align internal and external stakeholders in their understanding and acceptance of the work? And again, while these are guiding questions for all of the discussions that we've had, they are particularly relevant to reporting and educating because of the impact on that operational piece that we continue to talk about today. So we chose this discussion to wrap up the day because we often hear from our business members that they're doing great work, but they don't know how to tell the story externally or internally. Externally, they don't want to be accused of greenwashing. Internally, they want to make sure that they're being cost effective and that they are being good business minds with the things that they're investing in. Yeah. And then from our conservation partners, we hear a struggle about how to make learnings and information accessible to all, or how to plan for these as part of the overall budget. We've touched on this in the previous discussions as far as the money's there for digging the dirt, but what about this really important piece of actually reporting out the results so that we can spur more activity moving forward? So I'm really excited. Some of my favorite people are on the stage today. We have Anaí Villarreal, Manager of Sustainability and Environmental Affairs at HEB. We've been working with Anaí for a few years through many initiatives actually, but particularly Trees for Texans. We have Marketing Director at Texan by Nature, Karina Araujo. You see all of her team's work on social media. And then we have Ed Pinheiro, the president and founder of Ecometrics, who has been instrumental in our efforts to produce return on conservation index reports, really to dig into data for our return on conservation report as well. And they are all at the forefront of reporting in new and transparent ways and tying everything back to data and to economics. So super excited for you guys to learn from them. Ani, we'll let you kick it off.
Awesome. Thank you, Joni, the Texan by Nature staff, and Mrs. Bush for bringing us all together for such an inspiring day. I know that I've already learned so much, and I can't wait to continue learning with you after the session. Like Joni said, my name is Anaí, and I've been with HEB for 8 years. But today I have the great honor and privilege of representing over 170,000 partners, or what we call employees, who care deeply about conservation in Texas. Now, I want to start off by sharing the main takeaway of our conversation, and that is the right partnerships yield powerful results. And honestly, our partnership with Texan by Nature is delivering on those powerful results. And we all share a great love for this state. And I think that is one thing that unites us all in this room. And as a Texas-born and bred company, we couldn't agree more. And that is what Our Texas, Our Future is all about. It is our commitment to ensuring that our state will be just as great 100 years from now as it is today. And we do this first by looking inward at our business operations to improve how we source our product, how we handle our recycling, how we manage our surplus food, to how we invest in renewable energy. And we also do this by addressing the environmental impacts of our business by partnering with philanthropic partnerships that focus on conservation. We partner with hundreds of nonprofits and organizations across the state, many of whom are in this room today, that share that same love and vision for Texas. Now, we can go over and talk a lot about programs and conservations. I want to focus on one program, the Trees for Texans program. And while this program officially started in partnership with Texan by Nature in 2023, I'm proud to say that HEB has been supporting tree plantings long before we had this fancy logo. And what we realized is that we needed to capture data, right? We needed data to really help us understand what we were doing and where we needed to go. And so that's why today I'm so proud to be here on stage and sharing this information with others, is because we're operating Trees for Texans as a science-based, data-informed program that brings that transparency front and center with a public dashboard that can be visible on the OurTexasOurFuture.com website for our customers and stakeholders to view. Let's take a quick look at this video that brings this program to life.
Trees play an important role in the overall health of our communities.
They purify our air, they make our water cleaner, and they make our outdoor environment cooler and much more enjoyable in these hot Texas summers.
One of the issues Texas communities are dealing with is what's called the heat island effect. That's where temperatures in the urban environment are actually higher than they are in areas with more tree cover. We can reduce the heat island effect with a healthier tree canopy, and that means more native trees.
That's why HEB is launching the Trees for Texans program. By planting trees at our schools and our neighborhoods, we can lower urban extreme heat by up to 7 degrees. We're so fortunate to have the support and leadership of Texan by Nature, and we're so excited about the real impacts we're going to be able to make through Trees for Texans.
Now, I love personally when people come together to plant trees. So a show of hands, who wants to go plant a tree after this conference? Perfect. Everyone's hand should be up. You know, our program, we consider our program into 3 things. And we've really attributed these things to our success of the program. We have clearly defined program branches. We have expert program administrators. And we also have transparent reporting. Our 3 clearly defined program branches, no pun intended here, is that we have 4 schools, 4 communities, and 4 future that run independently from one another to ensure we can spread that wealth and knowledge of trees across the entire state. Our 4 schools branch of the program represents our commitment to plant trees at schools near a new HEB store. And we do this by looking at a heat map and selecting a school that can benefit the most from increased tree canopy. Our 4 communities branch of the program ensures that we add vital tree canopy across the entire state. And we invite nonprofits and organizations alike to apply for a $5,000 grant to plant trees in their communities. And lastly, the 4 future branch. This adds vital reforestation across the entire Texas for future generations to benefit from. And as you can see here, here's some of our partners or employees actively volunteering near South Texas. Our second component of success is really partnering with the right stakeholders. And our partnerships with Texan by Nature, the Texas A&M Forest Service, Arbor Day Foundation, and Brightview really ensures that we can plant trees at the right places, at the right time, and that these trees that we're planting on the ground will have ongoing care beyond day one. And lastly, our third component of success is having transparent reporting. And when we capture and present data in a unified way, we're able to bring conservation as an operational discussion with our leaders, but it also allows us to earn that trust from our stakeholders. And I'm proud to say that to date, HEB has planted nearly 250,000 trees across the state of Texas. Yeah. But of course, a successful program doesn't happen from day to night. There has been multiple lessons learned, multiple continuous process improvements that we've had to, pivot against. But when I said earlier that the right partnerships yield powerful results, it is because we had a history of trying to do all the work ourselves. And we realized that by collaborating and working with experts that make us smarter and better, we're able to achieve a much impactful program. With Texan by Nature, they bring in their amazing program management and grant-making opportunities to the table. With the Texas A&M Forest Service, we now have native tree species experts on our team. And with Brightview, we can ensure that all the trees that we plant in our schools have adequate irrigation in place. All of this, while HEB, we lean on our own understanding of how to run a business so that we can keep consistent funding available to partnerships and conservations across the state. So, my recommendation for business leaders looking to activate strategic conservation programs is to think holistically and understand where your business impacts the environment and how it depends on it. Because once you know those items, you're going to want to protect those. So, but most importantly, remember that the right partnerships yield powerful results.
Howdy, y'all. Howdy, howdy. I'm Karina Araujo. I'm the marketing director at Texan by Nature. And real quick before I start, we called each other last week to match. So I'm the tree trunk and they're the leaves. All right. Well, Texan by Nature exists to advance conservation, and one of the ways that we achieve our mission is through custom projects like the one that Anaí just talked about. We are a strategic partner for business, and we connect conservation to operational goals. Our internationally recognized portfolio of projects includes projects that deliver measurable impact, economic impact, and social impact. A couple of examples of our work include the NRG Dewey Prairie Garden, and y'all are gonna love this. This was a reclaimed coal mine turned service garden that provides fresh produce to 3,000 people in a Texas food desert. Yeah.
That's amazing.
The EOG resources study that evaluated the return on investment and social return on investment for native restorations on oil and gas rights of way, and the Trees for Texans project. So what were we trying to achieve with this project? We knew this was going to be a statewide tree planting campaign. It was going to benefit Texas's natural landscapes, our water, our wildlife, while offsetting construction impact. But as HEB's strategic partner, what Texan by Nature wanted to deliver was a science-based project that was solving a real conservation challenge. We wanted it to be aligned to HEB's operational goals and also authentic to their brand because they're so iconic. We wanted proof of impact with hard data and best-in-class reporting. We wanted to engage HEB's employees and the community to make the project visible and lasting. And lastly, to add capacity to HEB's team by managing the implementation and the reporting of the project, and also standardizing their approach to future conservation initiatives. So some key components that made this project so successful: everything about this project was rooted in data. That's why you see those roots there. It's a visual cue. And everything was aligned to their operational goals, their brand. We used GIS mapping, as Anaí mentioned, to pinpoint the hottest parts of the cities so that we were putting trees where they would cool areas the most. We also used socioeconomic insights while we were selecting who was going to get these grants, so that we were prioritizing schools and communities most vulnerable to environmental stress. We prioritized clear and accessible communication. You remember we went back and forth with iteration. No, it needs to be simpler. And what if they don't understand it? And we're constantly iterating, making sure that both internal and external stakeholders understood the purpose and the impact of the project. On the business side, this is how it connects to your operational goals. On the community side, this is how it improves your life. That was very important to us. And then we made the publicly available reporting dashboard. We wanted it to be visible, to be transparent. And then lastly, as Anaí mentioned, those strategic partnerships. We worked with Texas A&M Forest Service, who's in our conservation partner network. And we leveraged this connection. They let us know what trees needed to go where based on water, based on soil availability. Again, this expertise that, that's not our expertise. So leverage those partnerships. A few lessons learned. The first one, community engagement takes many, many touch points. When you think about working with communities, working with schools, there are layers and layers and layers of decision makers. So you can think of school boards, administrators, teachers, maintenance teams at schools. They all have their own priorities. So we identified these players early, and we tailored all of our communications to speak to them directly and answer the questions that each of them had. The second one, operational flexibility is essential. We started off planting 45-gallon trees because they're so impressive and cool, but they're very hard to plant. And actually, 15-gallon trees are cheaper to transport. They reestablish in the soil better, so we made that change. Another change that we made, we found out that our volunteers wanted to dig the holes themselves. We were actually pre-digging sites, so they took that off our plate. Thank you. And then lastly, timing matters. This is a cyclical program. So we sync our outreach, our grant applications, the awarding of the grant applications to the planting season in Texas. So we're in sync with nature here. And then lastly, recommendations for others that want to do similar projects. Number one, understand your partner's goals and define those success metrics early together. The second one would be pre-communicate expectations. You saw that data dashboard, and it's amazing that we're able to pull all of these numbers, but this was pre-communicated to everybody that received a grant. They know exactly the data they need to collect. They know exactly the photos they need to take. That's how I have these really cool photos. And we make the collection of the data and the storytelling very simple and easy to follow. And then lastly, tell your story creatively. Go beyond trees were planted in the fall. Think about it in terms of community pride and identity. If you want to find out what native tree you are based on your birthday, you can find some social media posts about that we use to keep this program running year-round through digital touchpoints and social media. And I just personally think that there are infinite ways that you can connect your conservation work to people on a personal level. And that's all for me, y'all.
So good afternoon. Very glad to be here again. I've come to many of these events, and it's always an honor to be here. Thank you, Mrs. Bush and Joni and the team here. So I'm what's considered in this planning for this panel the relevant third party, in the sense that we're not a project or a location. We are a partner to projects. Because our role at Ecometrics, we're the keepers of the methodology by that name, is to essentially measure the full value creation of nature-based projects. And we do that by identifying, quantifying, and putting a monetary value on the economic, environmental, and social aspects of a project. We worked with Texan by Nature on the EOG resources, native grasses versus non-native grasses project that was mentioned, and we've been helping the Texan by Nature over the last few years with the return on conservation index to give you a sense of what the results look like. So that's what we do. That's who we are. So why are we messing with this? Why are we doing this? So there are two main reasons for this kind of information. And when you're the last panel, but you have to have all your stuff ready in advance, you're wondering, one of two things can happen. I'm going to be perfectly aligned with the day, or I'm going to be totally off and I messed everything up. So fortunately, everything lines up nicely, because this concept of nature-based solution valuation serves the purpose of communicating and reporting, telling a compelling story, and helping make the financial business case. So we've been saying that all day. The concept of valuation, though, it finishes the equation. You talk about investment and you have very tight data on that. You know exactly to the dollar what you're investing. But when you're talking about the benefits of conservation and dealing with nature-based solutions, it gets a little bit fuzzier, and you can't take it to that. So what this concept tries to do is to make it dollars to dollars. So it's useful for communication and reporting, but it's also critically important to make the financial case, because if you don't make the business case, you have nothing to report or communicate. So it all ties together. So some concepts, some things we learned on formulas for success. And by the way, even though we are essentially a consulting firm, we were not created by the consulting community or the think tanks. We were created by a restoration and conservation nonprofit who was doing coastal restoration in Louisiana. The reason this methodology was formed and this concept of ecosystem service valuation was applied here is to make the business case to get investment to do the restoration. Their goal was restoring 1 million acres of damaged forest in the lower Mississippi River Basin. You can imagine the amount of money it's going to take to do that. You're not going to put it together with CSR budgets. I used to be the senior VP for sustainability for a multinational corporation, and my entire sustainability budget was not as big as the pickup truck maintenance budget for our water treatment field operation. So it gives you a sense. So anyway, we have to look at nature conservation through, if we want to talk about the return on conservation and the value of conservation, investing in it, you need that Rosetta Stone that converts nature to dollars and back, so that you can be able to say, this is why I'm investing in this, because this is a return. But it's got to be verifiable, it's got to be reproducible, it's got to be credible. It can't be black box, it can't be wishy-washy. And it's got to be practical, efficient, and doable. If it's 10 years, $50 million research project, not going to happen. It might be a research paper somewhere, but you're not going to be able to use it to make business decisions. So we learned some lessons along the way. Big one, we're not valuing nature. We're valuing the goods and services that ecosystems and nature provides. The biggest showstopper we ran into is making it sound like we're putting a dollar figure on a fish or a tree. Not doing that. But there's value that's relevant for that, which you can value because you can relate it to other things and services. Recognizing time frames and spatial scales, everything is not going to happen in the first quarter. Nature works at its own pace. You got to think holistically, and there's some great stories today about people thinking holistically, that environmental conservation and solutions provide many, many, many benefits. I've been doing this for a long time, and it's very hard to find a project that's a nature-based project, that's a conservation project that only has one benefit or two benefits. You may only be caring about one or two, but there's many, many benefits that go with that. The biggest thing that we also ran into was making the case for making the case. And what I mean by that is, our biggest challenge to get to do this kind of work is not, there's a million people that do it, why should we pick you? It's more, why do I need that? Why do I need that information? How is that going to help me? So that making the case for making the case was an issue. And some final recommendations: be open-minded to the idea of conservation and valuation. Don't worry. Talk dollars about nature. It's okay. You're not diminishing it. You're not cheapening it. It's part of the dialogue. Be inquisitive about the case for nature and conservation. Don't just write it off as this monolith and that's it. Dig into it. Find out what all the benefits are, because then you can really start to tease out what the benefits, what the value really is. And don't assume nature has low ROI, a return on investment. It's very efficient, very productive. Nature's been at this for, I'm a geologist, I think in billions of years. Nature's been at this for a long time. It knows what it's doing. So give it credit. So my closing comment: for conservation to be considered operations critical, it has to be couched in operations critical terms. And that's where this whole valuation story comes in. Thanks.
Annie, we'll start with you. Why does HEB consider conservation partnerships and projects a strategic investment?
Yeah, thank you, Joni. That's a very good question. And I want to bring up the point which I talked about earlier in my introduction. We want our state to be just as great 100 years from now as it is today, right? And we depend on nature to run our business. And as an ag-dependent business who is providing, food and groceries to our customers, ultimately, we depend on nature to do its thing, and we need to take care of it. And I've always liked to go think about, if there's a healthy and vibrant environment, then that's good for Texas. And what's good for Texas, it's good for our business.
Has this changed over the years? So you've been at HEB for 8 years, and y'all are taking the long view. You want it to be the same 100 years from now. Has this thinking changed, or have you seen the internal messaging change over the last 8 years to really embrace this?
Yeah, I think, we've been lucky enough to be owned and operated by the same family for 120 years. And when you think about running a strategic business and giving back to a community, it kind of has become part of our DNA, right? And what we're seeing now is that, yes, we've invested in our community investments. Historically, we are huge supporters of public education. We support other diverse categories and funding to our military, to supporting hunger relief initiatives. And what we're doing now is really elevating those environmental programs to that same maturity, because we know that it's important to continue to conserve and protect Texas.
Wonderful. Yeah. Do you guys use, you mentioned a lot of stakeholders in that, and I think it's obvious that you look at internal and external stakeholders when you're taking this long view of success. But do you use any particular tools or processes in gathering feedback from your internal or your external stakeholders?
Yes, for internal stakeholders, if I may just answer that part of that question, we value what our customers or our partners are saying to us, right? What do they want more? And when our partners are younger, younger employees, we're starting to see this trend, right, in conservation, where more and more of this younger generation is caring more about the environment. And they come to HEB, to work, get the paycheck and whatever, but they want something meaningful out of their work. And I think a lot of us can relate with that sentiment, is that we want to be proud of the work that we're doing. We want to be proud of the company that we work with. And so for us to get that feedback, we've heard that they, truly enjoy volunteering experiences. And so it's our duty and my job to provide those volunteering experiences for our partners, because that's what makes them feel, it's part of their commitment to giving back as well.
Gotcha. And then on the external side, is there any tool or process that you guys are using recently that you would recommend to the audience?
Yes, I think for our external stakeholders, either or for nonprofits, for example, I think a lot of them know how to reach me, so we'll start with that. But it's always interesting to, have our nonprofits come to us and ask us, how can they do better for HEB? And we put that on, how can we collaborate together, right? And so with our nonprofit groups, it's really allowing us an opportunity to have that conversation, so their feedback isn't just feedback that goes into an empty mailbox and no one sees. it's feedback that we're taking into consideration on how we're going to use that to create the new funding opportunity, or maybe to create that new funding program. And for our customers, the same thing. We have our customer support at HEB access available so that our customers can really tell us what their concerns are, how HEB can better, and how we can continue to meet their needs.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And Karina and Ed, I want to take this similar with you guys because you approach stakeholder feedback very differently, right? So I'd like to understand, one, tools and processes that you're finding successful in gathering stakeholder feedback, and then why that matters. How are you using that in the results reporting and the education? Karina, you want to go first?
Yeah. So I guess it depends who we're talking to, right? So if it's a new partner, a new business member, we use a lot of publicly available data. We like to do pre-stakeholder feedback, right? Before we talk to them, research what's available. I always tell conservation partners, like, look at their sustainability report, read through their strategies, and find out what their priorities are. And then by finding out, where their geography, where their operations are, you might find, barriers, opportunities, so that you come to the conversation already with some juice, I would say. And then with our ongoing relationships with current business members and conservation partners, it's all conversation. I mean, I think that you can look at a lot of data and you can put in those quantitative inputs, but until you have conversations, as Ed mentioned in the previous panel, from like bottom up, then that's where the real insights come in. So we do that a lot continuously throughout the year. TexWAC is a good example of that, where these conversations are happening bi-monthly, and you're hearing, leaders in sustainability, leaders in conservation, and their barriers and how they got through them, and those are insights that you can take in and use in your own organizations. And then more broadly, social media, we have a lot of, we call them engagement prompts that we use in our social media. So we're inviting conversation, we're inviting feedback and dialogue so that we can get information from, what's happening on the ground. And that has informed a lot of new things that we didn't know that were happening, for example, in El Paso. I wouldn't have known that because I'm in the Rio Grande Valley. My team members are in Austin. So don't underestimate the power of people on the ground, because yes, they're on social media and we can disregard that, but they're also in real life and they have jobs and they live in our communities. So definitely invite dialogue and get some feedback from there.
These are excellent points. And for this concept of valuation of these benefits, it's two extremes. You have very specific methodologies to quantify and value each benefit, whether it's water retention, social return on investment, cultural value, whatever. But the other extreme, the other tool, which is cross-cutting, which fits beautifully with this, is underpinning this identify, quantify, and value process is identification of those benefits, and that's done through stakeholder engagement.
Yeah.
And the tool that we use, and it's based on a variety of different sources, but it's really working with stakeholders early on to find out, what does this all mean to you? What do you expect to change? What's different? What do you see as a value, not value? And converting that almost anecdotal conversation into tangible, quantifiable process. So it seems interesting because everybody has made the same comment that an underlying approach is engaging with the stakeholders. To us, it's our feed. It's our feed and information to our process.
And you're doing all of that through conversation, Ed. You're not utilizing typically surveys or technology to do that?
It's a good question. We actually do it all. Everything from online, self-driven, like Google survey kind of a thing, to collective workshops where we pull together groups of stakeholders and we spend a couple hours, half a day, talking through. We're looking at big maps of the project. People putting little stickies down, and I used to fish there, I used to hunt there. So we have that conversational part of it. We're collecting all that information and then just kind of processing it. So.
Wonderful. So one thing that we see with our business members and our conservation partners alike, people like to use surveys, but a lot of times they have the questions, but they don't go to the end of the process and think about, okay, so if they answer the question in this way, or this way, what am I going to do with that data? And thinking about it from that back end of, well, what am I going to change? Is this really a question that's being asked in the right way? Or is this going to give me something that's going to have 5 more questions? And so do I need to go ahead and have those 5 questions in the survey as well? That's something that we've seen internally at Texan by Nature, because you've all been on the receiving end of our surveys after the summit. If you're in the partner program, we were constantly looking for stakeholder feedback. But that's the one thing, I think, thinking about what are you trying to do with that feedback? What are you trying to build? As Ed put it, it's that underlying foundation that you're putting back in. So if you meet the data stream in a certain way or the information in a certain way, making sure that's coming together in the way that you had hoped, and you're not getting something you can't use after the fact.
Joni, I have something to add, and it's a very specific example to something you mentioned in your presentation, Ed, how clearly communicate that you're not trying to put, a dollar sign on a fish. You're trying to quantify the ecosystem service. And one thing that we found out through social media, when we released the return on conservation report, that was like immediate feedback that we received, and people were like, well, you shouldn't be putting a dollar value on nature and all of these things. But our team, we're constantly paying attention to this feedback. And so we're like, I get it. I get that concern. So next time around, we use that insight. And when we talked about it, we said there are things in nature that are immeasurable, like a fluffy bobcat tail. Like you can't put a price on that. It's beautiful. It's amazing. But there are things that the bobcat provides, right? And that the forest provides that you can, and that they're good for our society as a whole. So that was a real quick lesson learned.
and a quick adaptation.
Yes.
So back to that flexibility. So moving on, Ed, what do you see as the biggest barriers in aligning conservation investment and outcomes to operational goals?
I would say the biggest barrier is that these discussions, when they occur in an organization, are not necessarily at conflict with each other, but they're operating in parallel. So there's operational goals, discussions, how am I going to invest in that, what am I looking for, and then there's my investment in conservation, my role with nature. Maybe one of my operational goals is to invest in conservation, but the connection of those ecosystem goods and services actually support my operational goals. So they are another supply chain in a way. And again, I know a lot of people hear that and it's like, what a horrible way to talk about nature. And that's not what, the point is, it's providing these goods and services, and the more you think of it that way, the more you see the value of it. One last comment on where this tool came from was, I talked about the restoration and a conservation group that was working in the lower Mississippi. The number one driver that got these, and these are the big petrochemical energy companies operate in that area. So that's who they were going to for the investment to do tens of thousands of acres of restoration. What got the investment was, yes, this is a great thing to do. We do want to plant trees or whatever, but it's a whole lot cheaper to keep that storm surge out there and not wiping out our $1.1 trillion of energy infrastructure that's along this Gulf Coast, as compared to building a big giant wall from end to end. So that connection between the service that's provided and how that meets an operational need, whether it's revenue, profitability, or risk mitigation, that's a big connection that right now it serves as a barrier, but it's a great opportunity to really break loose.
Are you seeing any tools or standards or frameworks that are helping bridge that gap today?
Yeah, interestingly enough, there's a lot of science and technical stuff around it, but I think one of the biggest things that I'm seeing happening is the dialogue that allows that discussion to happen, where you're sitting and talking about, if you're the conservation project, you're talking in this context of water retention, water quality improvement, flood protection, community enhancement, economic development. In the same context, you're talking about don't you want to be the one that plants 100 trees kind of a thing? You want to mix it in so that every part of the company or whoever it is doing the investment, everybody sees a role for them in it. And whether they're operations, whether they're the risk management team, whether they're the insurance, whether they are the CSR team, doesn't matter. Everybody sees that they have a little piece of this. And when you start adding all those pieces together, you start talking about some significant resource investment.
Yeah. So, Karina and Anahi, what about you guys? Are you seeing any actual specific tools or frameworks that are helping bridge the gap between operational and conservation investment, and really specific to reporting? Like, are you seeing any reporting from conservation organizations that's getting them over to that hump to deeper partnerships?
Yeah, I would echo what Urvi mentioned earlier with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the UN SDGs. That's the feedback that we get from conservation partners who receive the ROC index, which ties their project to economic benefit and ties it to how it supports those UN SDGs. I think that's a language that business is talking right now, so I would say that one.
Yeah, and I think, Joni, from the business side, with HEB, we know exactly how to track our sales data. We know if we're going to be using a tool or purchasing a software. We know the exact ROI from the business side, right? And what we're seeing with our philanthropic investments is that, yes, we can track how much funding we have given to our communities and across all the diverse groups that we support, public education, military, hunger relief, and now environmental initiatives. But what we're seeing is that there really isn't a single off-the-shelf tool that can really help us capture the outcomes. It's not the funding, it's the outcomes of the projects and how we can strategically align. And I think that's something that we're looking for.
Yeah. That's something we actually hear from a lot of our industry members is the same. They've been peddled. I'm sure you in the audience have been peddled the various mapping all of your supply chain and all of your everything to the UN Sustainable Development Goals for $1 billion. You can get there too, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's actually really, really difficult because a lot of these functions within the organizations are operating in silos. And so the biggest issue we're seeing is that aggregation and pulling the information together around a particular framework because everyone has their own standard. We are seeing the UN SDGs as one. Audrey mentioned earlier on the water side, the volumetric water benefit accounting. I always get the words in the wrong order. You can see me after it. I'll get them right. But basically water accounting, we see those being used as the primary frameworks right now to bridge kind of nature solutions and the business aspect. So, Ani, speaking to that, because you've talked about the different groups that you've been working with and some of your internal processes as well. So how has aligning Trees for Texans to your broader goals, because that was kind of your dream for that, changed the way you approach reporting and decision making?
Yeah, that's a very deep question, but I'll start off with HEB. We've always been a strategic business, and everything that we do is run with intention, right? And so with Trees for Texans, for example, we were able to bring this program, instead of being reactive, we were being proactive, right? And so now we have transparent data that really shows us what we're getting out of this program and where we still need to plant more trees, right? And that's how we're bringing this to leverage that with other philanthropic, partnerships and groups that we're doing and working with. But if you really think about it, we've been doing this with the business side as well. And so we've always approached ourselves to be in the business, to be proactive about items in Texas. And for a quick example I want to give is that if you're choosing, you want to educate your customers on recycling, for example, is that we think proactively of how can we get that across to our customer base, right? And many of you know is we've had access to plastic bag recycling in the front of our stores for so many years, And then we launched curbside, where you can now shop with us and pull up your cart. And we realized that we needed to also give the customers that opportunity to recycle plastic bags. But it even goes beyond that. Like, how can we continue to educate our customers on recycling? If recycling is your goal, you kind of identify that first, and then you start kind of working backwards, and you're more proactive about it, and you start asking yourself the questions of, okay, we're going to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. And that's being proactive instead of being reactive, waiting for essentially, that item to happen. And so I think for us is we are continuously going to continue to innovate our programs and what we offer for our customers, and we're going to do that with intention. And this time, we're going to continue to layer conservation into those decision-making processes.
I think that's so interesting because you took it back to, here's my goal, but it actually goes back to that stakeholder identification. Even if I'm looking at how Trees for Texans and aligning to broader goals, what did that look like and change the way reporting takes place? Well, it's by figuring out the who, what, when, where, why. It's who am I actually reporting this to? Why do they care? And how do I do that? Great work on that front. And then Karina, how has the Trees for Texans work changed your view on reporting and dashboards?
Well, I used to think of data collection as just like this very complex thing, and it's actually not. It's very simple as long as you agree on what those success metrics are early. And I think that was key for us developing that program. It's so simple, just, okay, this is the form that you fill out, this is the data that you enter, this is how it feeds into the dashboard. So it seems like something monumental, but it doesn't have to be. You can simplify it. And then with the dashboards, I've always known that GIS is a very powerful tool. Y'all heard Sam in the previous panel and all the incredible things that you can do with GIS. I had never seen it in a very just like front-end user presentation. You saw a picture of the dashboard in Anai's presentation. And it's so intuitive, it's so clear, it's simple to use. Anyone can hop on and you can look at, where the trees are planted, who was in charge of the project, number of students impacted, and it's just very clean. So shout out to Amy Snellgrove on our team. She worked on that and she designed it just usable, clean, end user in mind.
Yeah, less is more.
Less is more.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what about any other examples, Karina? You're deeply involved with the Texan by Nature 20. Are there any other examples of industry folks who are just getting that reporting piece right?
Yeah, so you'll get to meet about 23 companies that are doing that right. But one that stood out to me this year specifically was North American Development Bank, or NAD Bank. They finance and support environmental infrastructure projects on the U.S.-Mexico border. And if you go to their website and you click impact, they do an amazing job. It's so clean and understandable, but so rich in data. They start off broad with total investments that they've made on the US-Mexico border. And as you scroll, it starts breaking it down for you into the nitty-gritty of, the populations that were impacted, the investments, the cities, and then you scroll down more and it ties it to their operational goals. They really want to impact water quality, soil, air, and so you're able to see the projects kind of tied to those pillars. They're doing a great job, so yeah, NAD Bank.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. And Ed, you've been working on this for a while, and you work with a tremendous amount of data, a lot. And so how do you see this tie between reporting and broader goals, and what are your lessons learned there for both conservation groups and industry members on how to simplify that and make it usable for decision making?
I think if I had to kind of generalize and say, what is the one thing in the space that we're in, this concept of taking it all the way to the valuation stage, is just that, is a lot of reporting talks about, quantifies the investment, and then reports on the metrics from a quantification standpoint. So I invested $10 million and we educated 500 people, or we've planted 700 trees. So what happens in the mind is they're equating that the value creation by that investment is the investment. But we know that's not the case. We know that that investment in that conservation project has multiple times that amount of value created. You know, the Louisiana example, it's 1 to 30. And that's a conservative analysis. So what's happening is the reporting is underplaying the value of the conservation investment. So, but we're seeing movement in that direction, where you're seeing more organizations start to use, take it to that next step and say, we invested this much in this project, and it created this much value for the community and all these stakeholders. Where we are seeing this used more widespread is internal reporting. So in other words, speaking, because this is how these departments compete for investment dollars. So the conservation investment part of the company has to be able to speak that same way that the other departments are speaking, in terms of, I need this much budget and I will create this much value. So we're seeing that more and more internally.
Yeah. And so I think it's interesting that you all said the same thing in different ways, which was take the investment not just to the outcome, but all the way to the value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whatever that looks like for your stakeholders, it's investment to the total value return. And the HEB dashboard does that. It doesn't stop at number of trees. Like, that's where it starts.
Right.
And then it breaks it out to all of the value for the work that's being done, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
And Jenny, I would argue that until you do that, you're not really speaking of return on conservation.
Right.
Yeah, because you haven't finished the equation.
Right.
Yep. I agree. Okay, so Karina, what are some things that conservation organizations could do differently when it comes to reporting their results and to educating the stakeholders to get more folks aligned with their mission and more funders at the table to increase their outcomes?
And I think a lot of people have mentioned this one before. I think Robert mentioned it in the first panel, but co-create that reporting framework. Yeah. So agree on those metrics early, decide what you're going to measure, because a lot of the time conservation organizations are measuring stuff, but it's not the metrics that matter to the business. So, you know, come to the conversation with, look, this is what we've measured in the past, but be ready to share how it's relevant to the business. It's not just ecological, you know, tie it to those business goals. Secondly, I'd say simplify your story once you have that data. One thing that our marketing team says all the time, a quote that we love, is the limits of my language are the limits of my world. And that goes not just from what you understand, but also what you communicate. So make sure that when you are communicating the data, that you're simplifying it, that you're tying it to the operations, to how it improves community life. And then lastly, and this one's my favorite, is just presentation matters. Yeah. We talk about reporting, we talk about data, but it doesn't have to live on a spreadsheet or a 20-page report. The dashboard is a perfect example of that. Like, all the data is there. Anyone on HEB's team that has not worked on this project can go in, they can pull that data and they can tell the story. And that's how you move your project beyond conservation circles. That's how you move it to somebody else advocating for that work because they understand it.
Yeah. I mean, not just our partners, but also customers, right? And that's what's really important for us. The Trees for Texans initiative was really to create this transparency for our customers and the stakeholders in which we serve. Yeah.
Ed, any additional thoughts there on the things that a conservation organization can do differently around the reporting?
I think just changing the narrative a little bit in terms of, and I know that this is not the case as much anymore as it used to be, but it used to be, the argument was, or the case was, invest in our conservation project because it's the good thing. It's a good thing to do, and that's important, but behind the doors, when you're competing for that investment, it needs more substance.
Yes.
So I think not being afraid, as a conservation organization, not being afraid to speak as essentially a provider of goods and services. You would never mistreat, ignore resources that you use for your organization that allows you to continue to function. And so if you're depending on ecosystem services and you understand that the value they're bringing, why would you not? So conservation is just the vehicle to maintain and protect that aspect of it. And I want to, so that's my point. However, I want to comment on the bunny with the fluffy tail. So surprisingly, and I think one of the things the other conservation organizations could do is to really think broadly about the value of conservation, because that bunny with the fluffy tail, that mental health, that pride, that essentially good feeling that you get from that actually has value. There is value in that, educational value,
Yes.
health, mental and physical health value. So even when you go to the bunny, the fluffy tail, you still can speak to investors or funders or partners on this is creating value for these stakeholders, for this community.
Yeah. So I love the visual that you gave there, and Ani and Karina talked to this a little bit earlier too, the back and forth that they had in the creation of the dashboard. And I think one thing that could help as you're working with a new partner or you're envisioning how you're going to report your value at the end is do a mock-up. So many of us are visual. Karina, I think that was a direct dig at my love of spreadsheets, but she said, get out of the spreadsheet. But if you as a conservation organization have in mind that this awesome, simple way to report the value, do a mock-up so that you can show someone and then think about the capacity. We talked about that a lot today, and put it in the budget. But that visual will get you a lot farther than talking about what you think it looks like.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, industry partners, if you have a specific way or visual that something needs to be, share that up front so that the conservation organization understands the direction that you're trying to go and the story you're trying to tell. And that would make a lot of those conversations very fast. So, yeah. Ani, how is the Trees for Texans program messaged across your supply chain? And is your workforce involved in that?
Yes, I honestly love this question because being part of the HEB's workforce, of course, I'm biased to really loving this program. But internally, our partners take great pride in volunteering. It's something that I think our community members feel, and we're the first ones to respond for events, organizations. But I think something that they love about working with HEB, and this is our partners from our store employees all the way to our manufacturing, warehousing, to our digital/corporate employees, is that they really love to volunteer. And so something that we do with our Trees for Texas program is we utilize some of our tools internally. Like we have what we call our internal communications website that everyone has access to. We also have a full mailing list to get partners out into our tree planting events. And what I love about it is that it's truly more, for me, it's more than that. It's really seeing how we got together to plant a tree that's going to do something good for our environment, and you're taking a partner from the corporate space, and now they're joining, the partner from the store level is also coming, and they're getting to network and meet each other. And so when we say we're messaging across the entire company, it is because we are taking great pride of also allowing those partners to network within each other, which is in creating more passion for the environment and more passion for working with our company.
Yeah. And something that HEB did from the start is actually talk through all of that internal communication before the program was ever kicked off. That was a lot of dialogue and bringing their marketing team to the table and bringing their store teams to the table, et cetera. And Travis alluded to this earlier as well with their Apache projects of doing the pre-work so that it's not you've done all this great work and you're like, well, why didn't anybody care? like nobody's talking about this or nobody's joining us. They did all of the work up front and followed their typical processes to make it happen.
Yeah.
Consistency. So I just probably blew your answer for your next question. But,
I'll add to it.
The consistency for your internal teams and feedback loops. How are you working with the internal teams? Because that was a big piece of this project. Everybody was doing all these tree things and nothing was coming back to a central location. So what are you doing across your functions now to get those internal data points back into one central location?
And you're talking specifically to our projects out in the community. Yeah, so again, our partnership with Texan by Nature, your team has been so instrumental in making sure that we get the data. Shout out to Kinsey, who's been amazing at partnering with nonprofits across the state. And every time that we fund an organization or a project, they already know what they're going to be asked, right? So it's not like a scope creep. It's really, look, if you're getting this grant, we would love to support you, but can you also supply us with these metrics after you plant the trees, right? And understanding and having that clear transparency between the funder to the program manager, which is not the nonprofit, and then to the projects is really instrumental in getting that data back streamlined in the way that we need it to be, right? And it also makes it easier, like you said, it makes it easier because less is more. Now our nonprofits who are getting these grants know exactly what to expect, and they don't feel like, this amount that we're giving to them wasn't, it was necessary for them, but it was also necessary for us to have that data on our dashboard, like I said earlier in my presentation, because it adds that trust from our stakeholders. But I think something even more important for us internally, we're able to leverage that data within our operational discussion with our leaders. And now we're able to tell our partners and our leaders, like, this is how conservation can show up in your community. Yeah.
So for each of you, a quick lightning round. And Ed, we're going to start with you. What's one thing leaders today can do to look at conservation as operational versus philanthropic?
I think pick one thing. Include the players beyond the philanthropic part of the discussion. In other words, in the organization, pull together all the affected players so that, again, as I mentioned earlier, everybody sees a piece for themselves. So,
Karina.
I wrote down a quote from earlier. Bring the story home to them. Make your stakeholders' role in the story you tell and the data that you report just unmistakable. You have to make it obvious to everyone that you're speaking to. In marketing terms, we always talk about position, right? So position your conservation work next to metrics like risk management, workforce health, super important. We know that the benefits are there and the co-benefits are there, so communicate that and make that very obvious. And on the business side, communicate that within your company. So yeah, bring the story home.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And I think for us, from the business perspective, what I would like to say is whether you are conservation-minded or not, you have to understand how your business depends. We talk a lot about impact, but how your business depends on Texas natural resources like our land, our water, and air. And once you figure out how it depends on those natural resources, trust me, you're going to start caring a lot more about the environment in which we all live and share. And so I think that's my message to business leaders.
Awesome. And what a great way to think about educating stakeholders, right? We have this deep belief all of our business depends on these natural resources. So making sure when it comes to reporting and educating the broader stakeholder set that we have, that's part of that key message. This is all the way through. This is why this natural resource matters, and this is our investment and the value that's coming out of it for today. and for the future. So thank you guys very much for joining us in this discussion.
The Texas coast is my North Star. Been part of my life since the very beginning. It's just an essential part of, I think, what it means to be alive. The oyster is a keystone of this ecosystem. It is part of our community and our culture and our economy. There were a couple of years at our annual festival where we were not able to get local oysters. They were all coming in from out of state. It really felt sad to think about we may be facing a future where we don't have oysters here. So that's why my husband and I wanted to build this oyster farm.
The Water Street Oyster Bar does about 800,000 oysters a year in various ways, shucked, raw, fried, since 1983. So we've been attached to the oyster business for almost 44 years now. This is our home and this is our people, and we're proud of both. A lot of that weight that we're buying, we're just fighting for that little bit of meat in there. So traditionally, that last step was just throwing the shells into the trash and sending them to landfill. You can't just keep taking out and not putting back in. That is just the definition of unsustainable. Oil and gas people know that, landowners know that, and we as restaurateurs should know that as well. That's why the Sink Your Shucks oyster shell recycling program is so important.
Mature oysters can filter about 50 gallons of water every day. One thing that this does is allows light to go further to the bay bottom because the water is much more clear, and that improves things like seagrasses. So without those oyster reef structures, what we have is basically big muddy bathtubs.
Oysters are a finite resource. Once you reach the tipping point of drawing it down, there's no return. Without those healthy reefs in our bay system, we lose tourism, we lose cuisine, we lose the whole resource of why we're here.
We've learned in the past decade that over 90% of oysters are gone across the globe. So the question is, what's the problem here with reefs? Where are they going? Some of the causes for habitat loss for oyster reefs that we've learned about are things like storms coming through, lack of fresh water reaching our bays, so the bays are a lot saltier, and also unsustainable harvest activities. So we need to start thinking about solutions. Sink Your Shucks is one of those solutions. There's deep science behind it. We have researched where reefs should be rebuilt. What is the best way to rebuild them? We want to make sure that we're building something that really mimics what has been lost and not something totally different.
Where Sink Your Shucks comes in and really changes the game is they support restaurants in actually collecting those shells before they go into the trash can, and shells can be recycled and repurposed for reef restoration projects right here in the same places where the oysters came from originally.
We were paying and burning diesel to throw away the bed material for our #1 selling product. It's like throwing away fertilizer. It's like throwing away acreage. It was such a resource out of place. So we've been working not just now, for many years with Heart Research Institute and Sink Your Shucks to change that paradigm.
Recycling shells is really simple. Oyster reefs are really unique in that the way that they are built is that the younger generations of baby oysters attach on the shells of the older generations to make these really important coastal habitats in the water. And we pick up those shells, we stockpile them at the port of Corpus Christi, and we are essentially putting the oysters back where nature intended. We're sort of restarting that cycle.
So they come in, they give us the tools and the training to separate the oyster shell, stage it, and then pick it up routinely. The idea is a no-brainer. People wouldn't go throw away cement if someone was willing to come pick up cement in their dumpster for free. So restaurant owners spend less on trash, keep less wet waste going in the trash, and then the scientists and the brains get to grow their reefs out there. And it's a win-win-win-win.
In the case of farmed oysters, when we do harvest those shells and take them to the restaurant, and those shells go back into a reef that's going to be there for the long term, that is a net gain for the ecosystem.
Those oyster farms are bringing in new oysters, and they're also recycling the shells. When they participate in Sink Your Shucks, those oyster farm oysters that you're eating are contributing directly to habitat restoration. Sink Your Shucks has been a success already. We've had tens of thousands of volunteers come out to do hands-on restoration work and to make a difference. And it's possible to do this work up and down the coast. In fact, the local efforts are likely to have the biggest impact. So Sink Your Shucks is important here, but little Sink Your Shucks programs can be important everywhere.
People getting their hands on the shells and being an active part of the restoration process itself, it really drives it home and sticks with people. Everybody has a role to play.
In 10 years, I hope that we can say all of the oyster shell in Texas is going back to the bay systems, all of it. There's no reason we can't get there. You hear farm to table or bait to plate, and we believe in that, but we're probably the only industry where you get to go bay to table, table to bay, and it's a circle. The price to play is taking care of your resources, and we feel Sink Your Shucks is a great partner.
So I don't know about you, but it seems like a very fast day. I hope it seems like a fast day to you as well, and hopefully an inspiring one. I want to thank each of our speakers again for being candid and for sharing their insights. So thank you again to the speakers from today. And I also want to say thank you again to the Texan by Nature team for being brilliant and passionate and steadfast each and every day for just everything that you do and for supplying the quotes to start the day with. Thank you, guys. And thank you to Mrs. Bush, to our board, and our advisory council for continuing to lend your hours when you don't have to. And we appreciate your complete commitment to our mission and advancing conservation with everyone in this room. So hopefully at this point, the entire room is close to fulfilling, maybe you thought about why you're here when we were talking this morning to start the day. Hopefully you're close to fulfilling that why, or that you're filling your head with a whole lot more questions, that you're thinking about what to apply when you go home, what if you did something different, why you're reporting in the way you are, and maybe you want to change it to something different as you go back. But hopefully that you're thinking about how to get involved or how to partner with different organizations moving forward. So for conservation organizations, I believe most of you are in our partner network. If you're not, or Vidani is here, you would have seen her on stage. We have resources available. We also have our accelerator program, which is the Conservation Wrangler program. The amazing projects you've seen on video today are all part of this year's Conservation Wranglers. Those applications are open right now, and they're due at the end of January. So if you have questions, we will walk through that application with you, and the folks who will do that are Jake Cooper and Caitlin Tran, so they're available here to talk to if you're a conservation organization and interested in those, or if you know a conservation organization who should be interested. For our industry members, you can look at membership, you can look at Texan by Nature 20 submission, the Texas Water Action Collaborative. We have some beginning cohorts by industry for discussions to continue throughout the year. So if you're interested in getting engaged in any of those, we would love to talk through and plug you in where it makes the most sense. So at Texan by Nature, you've heard this from a lot of folks today, but we envision a future where every single Texan, every single business is engaged in conservation. Every single one of us engaged in some way. And as exemplified today, we believe in science and data-based approaches. We believe in action. We believe in not sinking ships or burning ships, but partnerships. Thank you, Billy. So we believe, just as Anahi said, that the right partnerships yield powerful results. We believe in reporting results not just outcomes, but the full value of what we're investing in. And we believe in building on what's working, which is how we tried to set up the day and give examples of what's working so we can learn from that and take that home with us. We believe that conservation is a vital part of our operations, our communities, and our lives. I think, again, I'll quote Anna, he said it best. Every single one of our businesses relies on our natural resources. We just have to map that. Some are more obvious than others. We believe in removing barriers so that we can work together towards a future that is vibrant for every single one of us. And we believe that every single person in this room is Texan by nature. We're leaders in our respective fields. We're leaders in our industries. We're leaders in our conservation areas of focus. And we each have the opportunity to start more or broaden our impact today. As mentioned this morning from one of the Texan by Nature team members, we are pioneers in a world-changing movement. Now, Ryan spoke up during one of the panels talking about the pronghorn and how that already changed conservation for pronghorn around the world. So today, we hope you'll leave here and stay connected to this community, that you'll start a new partnership, you'll engage in a new project, you'll re-look at conservation in some of your operations or how to achieve some of your sustainability goals through conservation, and you'll re-look at your reporting strategies and maybe make a commitment to doing something really, really big. I challenge each of you to do that, to join us in doing something big, and to work together to do that so that we are always building a future that is collaborative and deeply prosperous with economic growth, natural resource sustainability, and human health. We have a bold, bold what if. What if we leave here today and really apply something differently? What if we take this opportunity and we make future-changing action? I think we can each do that, and I hope you're leaving here with ideas to do so, and I'm really excited to work with each of you to do that. So thank you for being here today, and thank you for embarking on the journey.
Howdy, everyone. What a day. I'm Tiara Chapman, Social Media and Marketing Manager at Texan by Nature. Hopefully, I'll see you sharing about your time here today across all social platforms. Be sure and tag us. As a part of my role, I manage the Texan by Nature 20, and I'm so excited and honored to end the day with celebration by announcing the 2025 Texan by Nature 20. First, I'd like to thank Jetco and Holtcat for underwriting the work that makes this recognition possible. Thank you. The Texan by Nature 20 recognizes the best and most innovative work in conservation coming from businesses based and operating in Texas. As a part of the Texan by Nature 20, we honor companies across 12 industries whose ingenuity cultivates impactful programs and forges new and beneficial paths in conservation. Each year, an esteemed selection committee of top industry leaders is formed to evaluate the top 60 of 2,000 companies evaluated to select the final honorees of the Texan by Nature 20. Thank you to this year's selection committee, and please join me in thanking this wonderful committee for the time given to understand and evaluate goals, progress, and results of industry and conservation. Thank you, Selection Committee, and thank you to each of the honorees today for your commitment to conservation and leadership and sustainability. All right, let's get to it. The 2025 Texan by Nature 20. If you're an honoree, please make your way to the stage and join me as I call out your name. Once we have the complete group, please stay on stage for a final photo. I am delighted to announce the 2025 Texan by Nature 20. First, Acme Brick Company. Ally Financial. Apex Clean Energy. Build Native. Cemex. Stay right up here. The City of Farmers Branch. Amazon. Darling Ingredients. Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Ford Motor Company. HEB. Holtcat. LRE, Leeward Renewable Energy. Microsoft. North American Development Bank. Overland Partners. Oxy. San Antonio Water System. Shiner Kate's Vessel Brewery. Texas Health Resources. Vital Farms. And Excel Energy. Please join me in congratulating and thanking these leaders for their vision and leadership in conservation and sustainability.
All right, thank you everyone. If you guys would stay right here, we're going to take a couple of photos. For everyone else, there's a networking reception out in the main area and in the Hall of State. Don't forget to download the supplemental resources if you would like to, and then look for the Conservation Wranglers as well. They'll be around to continue sharing about their projects. Thank you again so much for being here today. Thanks.